So I'd like to get us started with one question first for the general contractors in the room. There was some talk, I think, in both presentations about data insights that robots are enabling on the construction management side. So I'm curious, was there any particular insight from either robot that really surprised you?
I mean, I think the one that I talked about was the differing field conditions and the early adoption and early understanding of it. I have to get closer. I can yell really loud. I'm a CrossFit coach too. Oh, okay. So understanding the field conditions and issues with layout early on, I think was something that was not expected, that on that one first production project was just eye-opening, and everyone really appreciated that and wants more of that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, absolutely. With both of these systems, the quality is impeccable, right? And that's just, it's an immediate selling point. Excuse me. But what we're seeing is we're getting also data feedback from the field, right? With Dusty's technology, right, you can have barcodes on the ground. You can connect it to a digital repository, and you're in fact creating a one-to-one scale of a digital model. With Canvas, you're getting reports on productivity, on quality, right? This is high quality data. This is not hand scratched from a foreman at the end of a weekly shift that's somehow misentered into our ERP system. This is really clean, very usable data, which I think is really exciting.
Yep, thank you. And could you speak a little bit more about the biggest barriers from going from the pilot project to a more consistent deployment on the field? I think both from the robot perspective and the construction perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was an interesting journey because we started as a subcontractor ourselves. So we just started doing the work, and we really didn't run much out of the field because it's really hard to run drywall in a lab because you just need so much space, and there's so many different variations and room you need for it. So we started in 2017. Actually, our first project was in Berkeley, and started out in the field, and we stubbed our toe pretty much all along the way. I think we had 2 days where the robot just sat on the site and didn't do anything, but we took lots of video of it with the sun setting outside the windows and things like that. And so I think one of the most interesting things about the process was, since we had our own crews, they actually got to experience how bad it was and set their expectations there. So every time we had a new software release and they got to move forward, it was almost like, don't take away my machine because they're used to this old one. And that was an interesting experience. And every time we took it away, we got to hear exactly what was good and what was bad. So it ended up being this long iteration. And the actual field members themselves have changed our process twice distinctly in our development. So that's been a great experience.
I'll echo some of the same things that Kevin said, but a little bit of how we got from pilot to production. When we started the company, we bought our first set of hardware in October of 2018, and we were out on our first job site the following January, so 3 months later. So we built our very first, it was basically a bucket of bolts with a printer strapped to it. You saw that in Tristen's videos. And by March, that was the photo that you saw of that very first job site that we did with Swinnerton. Every month that year, we were bringing our robot out onto another site. It was our engineers. We were throwing them out onto job sites, and they were horrified at the conditions that they found there. And they thought, oh my God, this is what I need to solve. Okay, I'm on it. And so that's how our team learned, what problems that they needed to focus on, how to address the customer concerns, because we were hearing them directly from Swinnerton and our early customers. And so that steered us towards making as rapid progress as we could. And then what happened the following year was that, we started also as a subcontractor like Canvas did, but we quickly heard from our clients that, oh, that looks really easy. Why can't I do that? And so we actually pivoted our business model to being an equipment rental provider. We started leasing out our robots to our clients, and that's what we're doing now. And we learned that based on feedback from our clients about what worked for them in their industries. And so we've been, our entire history has been like a continual process of learning from feedback and trying to respond to that as best we can.
I wonder now if you have any also questions from the audience as well. I see a couple of up front.
So Tessa, just to put Ray Levitt, now with Blackhorn Ventures, previously with CIFE and Stanford. Tessa, you said that your customers now want to use the robots themselves. Are your customers the previous people who are doing layout, or are your customers now general contractors who are bringing that in-house?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we started making our robots available, we started by first approaching the trade partners, the drywall companies, or the self-perform GCs, mechanical contractors. But then as they started to adopt the system, because they're the ones responsible for layout today, right? And as they started adopting the system, the general contractors started seeing the benefit that robotic layout would bring to them. And it's mostly for them, it's mostly schedule compression and risk reduction. And ultimately, because they're in charge of the success of the project, they started asking, well, why can't we rent a robot and have all of our trades use it? And so most of our clients right now are general contractors, actually. Some who self-perform like DPR and Swinnerton, but others who don't, but that see the value of providing this as a tool that they need their trades to use because it's going to bring value to their projects.
Hi, this is Vivek. I have a two-part question. The first one is for you, Kevin. So both Tristen and Tessa spoke about trust. Trust is very important when you adopt new products, right? There's a lot of edge cases when you deploy robotic products, and it's very difficult to solve early on. How do you manage to get this trust element to it, especially when you want to get it at scale? Doing it for one or two partners is easy, but doing it for hundreds and thousands is very difficult. So that's my first question. Second question is, we speak about industrialized construction today and prefabrication. All of this has implications for robotic deployments because robotics works on custom projects. Industrialized construction works on similar looking projects. So you're taking it offsite. So what is the implication of that for robotic startups as they come into place?
Yeah, those are good questions. On the first question, sorry, remind me the first question. I was listening to the second one.
Building trust for
Oh, yeah. So that is, at the beginning I said how we think of our approach much less about automating the whole task and more about changing the process. And what doing that enables us to do is by taking manual steps out of the process, but keeping the tools in the hands of the workers, people are extremely good at handling variation in a lot of different scenarios. At the same time, machines are very good at being accurate and repeatable. So we kind of put those things together and don't expect the machine to do every single part of the project. And so by taking those steps out, we enable productivity while still having the worker do a lot of the work manually, and we can continue to work towards higher and higher levels. So for example, in certain characteristics, if you have enough through girders in a wall and that you just don't want to take the machine up there, the machine might be doing the lower section and the person might be doing a quick level 1 up there. And so that allows us to handle a lot of that variation just on the fly. And now remind me of the second question. That's right. Yeah, so we actually we've worked before starting Canvas, we actually spent a lot of time working with the US military, but also a lot of OEMs like Airbus, Toyota on the manufacturing side. And what we always saw in manufacturing was the cost of deploying robots in there and the full installation was basically most of it. And we constantly had fire drills with the teams that we worked with where they couldn't respond for 2 months because one of the automation lines was installed, didn't meet acceptance testing, and now the factory was down for 4 months, wasting $100,000 a day. And so when you think about the flexibility of this automation, it actually works just fine in the factory, but now you can skip that installation step as well. And so whether you're talking about site, whether you're talking about prefab, what we've basically started to produce between Tessa and myself is an incredibly agile form of manufacturing. So kind of bridging these two worlds. So you can go either way.
I think we had one in the back first.
Yes, hi. I'm Josh, I'm with Neighbor. My question is for Kevin and Tessa. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about how do you make decisions when you're approaching your product roadmap for your robots? How do you make decisions between general purpose and specific tasks. I think, Kevin, you had an image in your presentation of, of a KUKA robot, which in the automotive and aeronautical industries is like the iconic general purpose robot. When it comes to construction, how are you guys thinking about the path forward between general and specific?
That's a great question. So I think of it like, Goldilocks, you can't err on either side. You have to kind of thread a really fine line down the middle. If you look at the broader space of robotic automation, right, there's a lot of humanoid robots, there are quadruped robots, we've all seen Spot on construction sites, right? And these are general purpose robotic platforms. But the challenge is to find a task that they're actually really good at. And so when we started Dusty, we're familiar with all of that existing capabilities out in state of the art. And we tried to find something that would solve a single task with a relatively easy to build robot, but be very valuable in that task that it is performing. And that's what we found in layout. And so it's sort of like the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone, right? Of a robot that is not trying to boil the ocean and solve all of the problems, be perfectly humanoid and, do all of the things that a construction worker would do, but still solve a very neat problem, but a problem that is actually very high value for the industry.
If I could just add my 2 cents to that question. I also think that you're going to get a lot more success out of single task robots today, in large part because tasks out on job sites are very material specific. And same with robotics, right? The manipulators, the things they have to do and work with are going to be material specific. They're going to be task specific. So I think you're seeing a lot more success in adoption of single task robots. But of course, I think now we're seeing some multitask robots where we can see some additions to that, but early market adoption will be fast.
So we have one more question from online as well.
We have an online question from an anonymous attendee who asks, and I think this is directed more towards the GCs. Do you expect pushback from trade unions and associations when these technologies become scalable?
I'm laughing because there's a resounding yes as the first initial response. However, I will say that during our testing, we specifically went to a carpenter union hall to do some of our testing, to introduce them to these solutions, to get their buy-in, to even get their feedback on what they would like to see the landscape of the solutions become. And I also think it has a lot to do with the discourse and how you speak to them about it. I'm not replacing workers. They can't provide them fast enough to me. I'm giving you a different tool to perform your job better, safer, and faster so that your union workers can survive in this industry for a long career. And I think that once they come to understand that, they actually value and appreciate these solutions in a very different way than the newest hammer or the newest drill. Their workers are happier once they start using these things, and once they start to understand that, I think the adoption will shift. But there is going to be a lot of challenge to that. There's going to be a lot of conversations, and that's the human part of robotics, right? There's always going to be the humans involved.
I couldn't said it better myself.
So I want to come back to, Martin, for those that came late with CIFE. I want to come back to a comment you made, Henning, about the data that gets collected, really almost as a side product by having the robot on site. Because for me, that's one of the least mentioned benefits of robots. I mean, you spoke to the quality benefits, you spoke to the safety benefits and health and safety. But if I put myself out 5 years and we've deployed lots more robots, who will know more about construction? The established companies or the robot companies? I think the answer is pretty straightforward, because the data we have about construction in established companies is notoriously extremely poor. And so where do you see that going, and who owns this data? Is it, are you able to, is there a data play on the robotic side, or are the general contractors actually not asleep at the wheel as some seem to be? Sorry. On this question? Yeah, curious about a few comments from your side.
Well, If you think about the trajectory of electric vehicles, right, we have a lot of self-driving car companies, you know, in and around Stanford campus, for example. Those are robots, and they're generating huge amounts of data every second that they're in operation, right? So the robot workforce of the future on construction sites is going to be the same. Every moment a robot is in operation on a job site is an opportunity to leverage its sensors in order to capture information about what's going on that job site. If you're a smart robotics company right now, you'll be leveraging that and turning that into a platform play because that data is incredibly valuable. It's not something we have today. It's way too expensive to send people out with cameras every single moment in order to capture every single condition on every single job site. But with robots, that's what you get. And so I see that as a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think for us, we're very excited about that. You hit the nail on the head with the fact that a lot of the data we deal with is quality, is poor quality, and you know we're also looking at that. I think it's going to be interesting because I think the general contractors have the opportunity to get the system-wide perspective versus a task-specific robotics. So we'll certainly probably go into purchase agreements. But at the moment, we're just happy to get the productivity data that we're getting from both of these robots. It's something that's usually that. Yeah.
I guess I want to jump in on that answer. Just say one more thing. Henning and Tessa both had great answers, and I'll just say to the part of the question you asked is who will know more, and the answer should be they'll both. Right? Because that is actually how you propel this industry forward in the most meaningful way. If robot companies know a ton about what they're doing, we can make better products and continue to push efficiency. And if GCs and owners and developers and architects have better fidelity on what they're doing, that's how we can really drive projects. So the answer is both, and that's how you make the data play profitable.
Yes, I'm Cliff Moser with Stanford Healthcare Planning, Design, and Construction. And I have a kind of a practical question. Job site use in the evening and at night, the job sites are pretty empty at that point in time. And I was wondering if you could speak to that as an opportunity to do the layouts and finish the drywall and do all those types of things. As a hospital owner, this is something that I think is really important to us to be able to actually have people out on site doing the work, when the layout has been done. So maybe some discussion on that.
I'll start with that one. So there's a term in the manufacturing industry called lights out manufacturing. And I think if you apply that to construction, you get the term lights out construction, which is really fascinating concept, right? Can you build a building? They say lights out because people need lights, robots don't, right? And so, if you have robots doing all of the construction, then you can turn out the lights, save power, and just get the work done without as many people involved. I think that is, as an aspiration, like an incredibly powerful vision of how this future could be. I think, unfortunately, that it's going to be a long time coming. And that people still use a lot of judgment and skill in terms of how they direct the robots to do their jobs, that people are going to be needed for a fair amount of time, but their role is shifting towards being supervisors rather than being laborers. And so I think as we move forward, as the industry develops, we're going to see more and more tools being used in off hours on second shift, possibly because it helps you compress your schedule and get more work done faster and meet demands, but also because the tools are enabling that kind of work.
Mustafa Hosseini from Google. Juan Hendrik touched upon the asset light versus asset heavy approach, and this obviously allows a little bit flexibility when you don't have a prefab warehouse nearby. You can continue with stick build. Just from the GC's perspective, can you talk a little bit how you can operationalize it and even make it standard part of your general requirements, like the big cranes, having these robots, and then training the trade partners, especially if you have a small duration construction projects, 6 to 12 months. How do you ramp up? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take a step at that. For us, because we are self-performing these trades, and we can kind of control its destiny, right? The use of the robot. For for Dusty in particular, it's something where you can require your trade partners to use. We're happy to train folks to use the machine, and think of it as a forklift or a grade all. That's something that's a piece of equipment that's on the job site that anyone could use, right? As long as they're certified to operate it safely. With Canvas, it's going to be the sort of a similar thing where we're going to be performing the work, and this is just a new tool, right? And if we're going to have it in our tool belt, we're going to bring it out to site because of all of the stated benefits. And so, we have to look on a job by job basis. I would say these tools, because of their increase in productivity, we're going to see a lot more gains on larger projects. Just more volume makes a lot more sense. And I think as time goes on, we'll probably see them move into smaller sort of boutique type projects.
Anyone want to add? So I think kind of to conclude, I wanted to ask one last question, because there was some mention about robots' ability to attract younger audiences also to the construction industry. And I thought that was really interesting, especially we have a few students in the audience today from civil engineering and also a few other majors, I think. And I wonder if what advice would you give them if they wish to get involved with robots in construction? What can they do today?
I mean, I think my answer to that in a lot of ways is go after what motivates you. One of the opportunities here is that this actually diversifies a lot of different ways to be involved with robotics. So before it was like, if you were a software engineer or you were a mechanical engineer, you may be able to go into a robotics field. Now we have people on operations side, we have people on the construction side that are learning to use them. We've even had one of our tradespeople jump to a robot technician and come out of the trade. So we're seeing a lot more opportunities. So if you want to get into, if you're really excited about construction and you're really excited about robotics, find the thing that you're passionate about, whether it's managing fleets of systems, whether it's training people, whether it's actually thinking about how you integrate BIM with and software with, is it the data or is it actually the machine itself and wrenching on it? So I think there's more opportunity now to get involved with robotics.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like Kevin was saying, I think it depends on the side of the table you want to sit on with robotics and construction. Myself as an example, I'm a psychology and anthropology major. I don't have any engineering background whatsoever, but this has been my passion, construction for 22 years. So there are different ways to insert yourself into the conversation, whether you want to help inform the processes, whether you want to help build the robots. I think that really, again, find your passion, find what part of that process is exciting to you, and just jump in and start asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'll add, if you're a student here, if you're in the construction program, find someone in the computer science program and put your heads together. And vice versa, if you want to go into construction and be on that side of the table, I think there's room for everyone. Right? We're going to need more task-specific robots in the near term. We're going to need people to observe the trends and see where we can combine these new technologies into more wide-ranging offerings. And we're going to need people to help adopt the technologies. It is still a technology push. No buts about that. But it's easier. It is easier with these tools.
Yeah, if I've only learned anything about robotics, it's that it takes a lot of people to build a robot. There's all these different disciplines involved. And not just that, we're not just building a robot, but Kevin and I, we're building companies. And these companies require a lot of different roles. And so I'll put in a plug, we're hiring, Dusty's hiring. We have a create your own job opening on our website. If you don't see anything that fits you, write up something, I will read it personally. But I think all of us here would love to have more people come into the industry. We need the help.
All right, I think with
I
that.
Can I
Yep.
ask one more question?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Cynthia. I think we have time. I'll often ask this question. If you come back next year, hopefully you will. What will you tell us?
I think next year you're going to hear probably two different things. I'm sure Tessa will echo some of this. Is one, a little bit more about the pains of getting robots everywhere into many different parts of the country. And the second thing you'll probably hear us hopefully talk a lot more about is what are some of the cascading effects that we now can affect other trades? How can we replan schedules around some of this now that it's more established, now that it's working, and we can start to think about what some of those next steps. So I'm looking forward to being able to have that conversation.
You guys all is that the same answer?
I can jump in a little bit if you want. Next year, by this time, I love Kevin's answer, because if you look at how fast Dusty has grown, like every year we've been in operation, we've learned an enormous amount. And so within the past year, right, we've gone from self-performing to having all of our customers operate robots nationwide. We have 15 robots all across the country right now. And, you know, by next year, we will have learned a lot about how those are actually impacting real construction projects, right? Some of the projects that we just started, cut our teeth on when we started, are just now finishing up, right? And so I'm expecting a lot more case studies to start coming through, more quantitative evidence of how these robotic solutions are starting to impact the industry and where we can go from there. What's next?
All right, I guess we'll do the very last question.
Thank you. So Tessa, Kevin, you've been the earliest pioneers in robotics and construction. You've learned through a lot of problems and stuff. Is there a call to action to this room? Because we have some of the leading minds in construction in this room. Is there something that you would ask of people in this room that could help support adoption of robotics in construction?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say the same thing someone said to me when my wife got pregnant and I was looking at having a kid, is that it takes a village. And in this case, I'll say it takes an ecosystem, right? Everybody from the architect to the owner, to the developer, to the GC, subcontractor, and the union all have a part to play in this, and value to get out of it. And so I think if you're an owner thinking about how do I get this on my sites, it's about talking to your GCs, and then if you're a GC, it's about talking to your subcontractors and start having that conversation about how do we move in these directions and encouraging that. You know, I think we talked about the human factor and the headwinds is there's developing trust bottom up, and there's developing excitement and support throughout the ecosystem.
If you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said, you know, do a pilot with us, right? Get us on some jump sites. We're past that point, both Kevin and I. I would say that the main friction that I see as we think about how do we get more automation, more robotics into the construction industry, it's really about rethinking the processes. Right? We're as an industry, we are stuck with doing things the way we've always done things. And everyone in this room is trying to push that forward, right? That's the reason we're here. But in order to take advantage of some of this latest, and I'm not talking just Canvas and Dusty, but all of the different construction tech options that we have out there, it does require typically a change in process, right? You have to rethink how you've been doing things for eons, and you have to be open to that. And so what I love is the conversations that are coming up around, well, what if we do things differently? What does that enable? Or how can we do this better? How can we open our minds and think, if I change this process, like for example, if I, you know, do layout, wait to do layout until after we have 100% construction documents, that's a new thing, right? But you get such better results on the other end of it, right? So being open to that kind of change in process and the impacts that has on the schedule and the contracts, I think that's something that I think we need everyone to participate in making change happen.
Right. I think with that, we can formally conclude and we can keep the discussion going through lunch. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights and we look forward to your lessons learned next year, I guess.